Shalom, shalom, peace, peace, everyone. Thank you guys for joining into our class today. We are discussing the everlasting covenant. This is part 3. We discussed the everlasting covenant in regards to the origin of the covenant between Yah and man, in regards to Adam's relationship with Yah and what happened when that covenant was broken. We also discussed how that covenant was attempted to be restored unto Noah, and that after Adam fell, there was an addendum attached to what Adam said, what Adam was required to do, which was the sacrificial system. And then we also saw through Abraham's life in part 2. We also looked at the covenant that was given to Abraham as a representation of the everlasting covenant. This was the same covenant of dominion that Yah was given to Adam and Noah and everyone else who served him. We also saw that Abraham lost faith and was about to extend that covenant over to Eleazar, but that wasn't a part of the covenant. The covenant was that there was a seed that was going to come. And that promise was the same promise that was offered to Adam in Genesis 3:15, where it says that the seed will come and will have enmity with the serpent's seed and will crush the head of the serpent. This promised seed was given during the time of Adam and Eve, during the time of the restoration of their covenant. So there was an addendum attached to the covenant that a seed was going to come and be the blessing, or the blessing would go through that seed. We also saw in the times of Noah, when you look around Genesis chapter 9, it starts out by saying that Yah is giving them a covenant where he's giving him dominion over all the earth, and the fear of all the animals would be on him, so that way he had dominion and rulership just as Adam had. Then he came up with a covenant and said that I will make my covenant with you and your seed after you. And his sons was there. Go back to part 2, part 1, and you'll see that he's making this covenant with Noah and his sons. And then he talks about a covenant that's with him and his seed that's coming after. I believe that this is a reference of the seed that's promised to come, just as he gave Adam and Eve that same promise. We went to Abraham and we talked about the promises and how the everlasting covenant was being extended and restored with him. But then there was more attachments besides the sacrifices that was made with Abraham. One of those covenant attachments was that there was a covenant that his children, that he would have an heir. This is Genesis chapter 15, that he would have an heir, and that heir would be the blessing that would come through that heir. Now, in Genesis 15, he didn't say it was Isaac. Now, many people, they probably would place it on Isaac, but I don't see it that way. I place it on the Messiah. So the promised seed that was given to Adam, that was told to Noah, is now being promised that through Abraham's lineage, there would be a seed that would be his heir. And then we see Galatians chapter 3, verse 29, it says, if you belong to Messiah, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. It's a lot. So we saw all these addendums, and then we covered circumcision and how circumcision was added as a token of the covenant that he already had, but it was added as a token to help him remember the covenant that was for him personally, as him being the father of many nations. That covenant is only for him. It was something that was supposed to be fulfilled through his children by that seed, for him to be the father of many nations, not for all of us to be the father of many nations, by the way. So now we're going to get into Moses' covenant, the covenant that was given to Moses, so we can see how the everlasting covenant is constantly being restored to his people, but then there's also addendums to help us to stay on that track, to stay on that relationship, to stay on that right path in order for the everlasting covenant to actually be accomplished. So we're going to look at today Moses and David. We're going to look at Moses and David today, which is later on going to push us to part 4, which is going to talk about the covenant with us. So Moses and David, let's look at Moses for a second, right? Many people look at the covenant with Abraham. There is a difference with the covenant with Abraham and the covenant with Moses, because the covenant with Abraham was given. The covenant with Abraham was given to us in order for us to well, it was the covenant with Abraham was that his children would then possess the land, that his children will be blessed, and that he will be the father of those children, right? So the mindset is that the difference is that the Israel is not receiving at Mount Sinai the covenant that they are fathers or that there's another nation. No, they are reaping the benefits of a covenant that was already made with Abraham. But then there's an everlasting covenant that was made with Abraham, made with Noah, made with Adam, that was going to pass on, and it's also going to be made with us as well. This is to show that the everlasting covenant is one covenant, even though there's addendums or other covenants attached to it that has its own requirements. Let's look at Exodus. So let's look at Exodus real quick. Exodus chapter 2. I hope that this will make these covenant conversations a little bit more clear. Exodus chapter 2, verse 24. Just to make it clear what Elohim is doing at Mount Sinai. It says, Elohim heard their groanings, and Elohim remembered the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and with Jacob. And Elohim looked upon the children of Israel, and Elohim had respect unto them. So there's a remembrance of a covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is why he is going to extend himself to the children of Israel, the children of Jacob. Let's continue to look at this. Exodus chapter 6. We're going to look at verse 6 to 8. Look at what it says. It says, wherefore say to the children of Israel, I am Yah, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will rid you out of their bondage, and I will redeem you with a stretched out arm with the great judgments. It says, I will take you to me for a people, and I will be unto you Elohim, and you shall know that I am Yah, your Elohim, which brings you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. And I will bring you into the land, there we go, concerning that which I did swear to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you for a heritage or inheritance. The word heritage it comes from the root word inherit or heir. So heritage, I am Yahuwah. So we see here the promise, the land that was promised to Abraham in the covenant is being extended to Israel, is being fulfilled or completed to Israel. So Abraham's covenant is being given to the children of Israel. Okay. Let's see. So let's continue to see it. So now I think everybody knows the story of you know the bondage and how Yah came and delivered Israel out of Egypt. So we're gonna try to fast forward and go all the way to the time of the actual covenant that's being given to them at Mount Sinai. So let's go to Exodus chapter 19, just so that way we won't get it confused. Exodus chapter 19, verse 5 and 6, it says, now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, then you shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for the earth is mine. You shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a set apart nation. These are the words which you shall speak unto the children of Israel. So it says here, if you keep my covenant, so there's a covenant that he's going to give to them in order to allow them to be a people that's above the nations, right? Now, Yah always elevated his people, but it wasn't necessarily a people. Abraham didn't have a nation around him. Abraham was a ruler over his house. That's what he had on this earth, and that his house was being looked at, and basically all the nations were able to see Yah moving through Abraham. And Abraham basically spread the knowledge of Yah throughout as the nations were watching how Yah was dealing with his family. So now we have the difference here. The difference here is that this covenant with Abraham, that he's going to bring a nation out of his people. Let's go to that covenant, that promise right now. Genesis chapter 15. Look at what it says in Genesis chapter 15. All right. And it says, well, this whole chapter he's talking about the covenant, but there's a specific statement that he makes about his children. And he says in verse 7 of Genesis 15, he said unto me, I am YAHUAH that brought you out of of the Chaldees to give you this land to inherit. And he said, Elohim, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? And he said to them, take the heifer 3 years old, and the she goat, and three years old, and a ram 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. So he's going to tell them, as they make this covenant together, he's going to tell them how things are going to be. He says in verse 13, he said unto Abraham, know of a surety that your seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall be afflicted 400 years. Also, that nation whom they shall serve will I judge. So he's talking about his children, his seed will be in this land, and he will judge that land. And he says, you shall go to your fathers in peace, and you shall be buried in a good old age. But in the fourth generation, they shall come here again, for the iniquity of the Amorites are not yet full. So in the fourth generation, they will come back to where Abraham was dwelling, which is in Canaan, and they're going to possess that land at that time. So it's very clear that this covenant right here, verse 18, in the same day, Yahuwah made the covenant with Abraham. And he says, unto your seed I have given this land from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. And he talks about all the nations that's going to be driven out, or Moses references all the nations that's in that area that's going to be driven out. So very clear, this covenant, this land is being given to this group of people. This group of people is becoming a nation, but they are accepting the covenant, and then they're about to receive a whole nother covenant. Remember, this is in Exodus 19. He's talking about his covenant, and he's going to give them this covenant with additives to it, with addendums to it. So let's go to Exodus chapter 20. Now, Exodus chapter 20, verse 1 to 17 is the 10 Commandments, right? After that, listen to what it says after that in verse 18 to 21. It says, all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed themselves afar off and stood afar off. They said to Moses, you speak with us and we will hear you, but do not let Elohim speak with us lest we die. Moses said unto the people, fear not, because Elohim is come to prove you. Fear not. He's come to prove you that his fear may be before your faces, that you sin not. And the people stood afar off, and Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where Elohim was. So what was happening here? The covenant that was being given to Abraham had happened a certain way, right? So there's a covenant fulfillment that he's making with the children of Israel that is not based off of their faith. It's based off of his promise to someone else. Okay? So his promise to Abraham is the reason why he's enduring through this lack of belief. You see, the people moved away and said, don't let, right here in verse 19, do not let Elohim speak with us. But the promise that was given to Abraham right here, look at what it says here in verse 5 and 6. He brought him forth, 5 and 6 of Genesis 15. He brought him forth abroad and said, Look now toward the heavens, tell the stars, if you are able to number them. He said unto them, So shall your seed be. And it says in verse 6, it says, Abraham believed in Yahuwah, and he counted it to him. Yah counted it to him for righteousness. And he counted it to him for righteousness. And he said to him, I am Yahuwah that brought you out of the land of Ur, the Chaldees, to give you this land to inherit it. So he says he believed it, and it counted to him for righteousness. But here in Exodus chapter 20, we see the people is removing themselves and going far away, telling Moses to say, don't let Yah talk to us. Yeah, Moses is trying to help the situation. He's saying, do not fear. Elohim has come to prove you that his fear may be before your face, and that you sin not, that you don't go against this covenant. But the people stood afar off anyway. So how can a relationship or everlasting covenant be connected to this? How can this group of people enter into a relationship-based covenant as Abraham did, as Adam did, as Noah did, that was based off of belief in what Yah was saying? How can that occur if they don't want to hear what Yah is saying from Yah? This is just a setup for them to disbelieve Moses. So there was many instances in which Yah had to prove that Moses was speaking truly on behalf of him. So this is the first element that shows that the children of Israel needs more addendums or more requirements or more laws in order to help them build their understanding. And we're about to get into this. So did Yah understand that this was not a good situation? He was fulfilling the covenant that he had with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but this wasn't a good situation with these people, right? So these people were having not only did they not believe what Yah was saying, but they had this disconnect. They wanted to be over here while Yah was over there, and only a few people went near. So did Yah understand what was going on? I mean, of course, Yah understood, but let's look at what Yah says. Deuteronomy chapter 5. Look at what Yah said about the condition of the Israelites at Mount Sinai. Let's start Deuteronomy. Let's read verse 1 to 6 first. It says, Moses called all Israel and said to them, Hear, O Israel, the statutes and the judgments which I speak in your ears this day, that you may learn them and keep and do them. Yahuwah our Elohim made a covenant with us in Horeb. Yahuwah did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us, even us, who are all of us here alive this day. What do you mean, not the covenant with our fathers? Well, he made a covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he was giving that covenant to them. Because of their lack of belief, he added another covenant, which we're gonna read about right now. This covenant at Mount Sinai, with all the statutes and judgments and the Levitical priests from Exodus chapters 21 all the way to 28, all of these laws is based off of trying to get Israel back into the everlasting covenant or the Abrahamic covenant. You see, so he says, Yah is going to make a covenant with us. He didn't make it with our fathers. Now, Deuteronomy, this is referring to the time period in which their next generation was going to go into the promised land. So even the covenant that he gave to them at Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai, the first generation did not accomplish this. They died. So he's trying to give that same covenant that he gave to the last generation. He's trying to give it to them. And he's reminding them, I didn't have to give this to your forefathers. I didn't have to give this to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm giving it to you. You are becoming a nation. So he gave them laws to help them govern the nation, to help govern the nation. So he says, but with us, even us who are here alive today, it says, Yah talk with you face to face in the mount out of the midst of the fire. This is referring to their parents, the past generation. He says, and I stood between Yah and you at that time and showed you the word of Yah. because you were afraid by reason of the fire and went not into the mount, saying, I am Yahuwah Elohim, which brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. So they did not want to go in. So he's explaining this to this second generation. This is the book of Deuteronomy. So they're about to go into the promised land, and he's reiterating everything that was supposed to be given to that first generation. All right, let's go forward. Let's go to verse 23. So verse 23, it says, and it came to pass when you heard the voice out of the midst of the darkness, he's talking about the last generation. It says, for the mountain did burn with fire, that you came near unto me, all the heads of the tribes of your elders. And you said, behold, Yah our Elohim has showed us his glory and his greatness, and we have heard his voice out of the midst of the fire. We have seen this day that Elohim is talking with man, and he lives. And he says, now therefore, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of Yah our Elohim anymore, then we shall die. Who in the world told them this? Yah is telling them, come to me. Yah is telling them, obey me. Yah is telling them, receive my covenant. They're saying, we heard his voice already. We don't want to hear anymore, or we're going to die. Verse 26 says, for who is there, right? Who is there, where is it? Verse 26, for who is there of all flesh that has heard the voice of the living Elohim speaking out of the midst of the fire as we have and lived? Go thou near and hear all that Yah our Elohim shall say. Speak unto us all that Yah our Elohim shall speak unto you, and we will hear it and do it. This is what that generation said. Yah heard the voice of your words, and when you spake unto me, Yah said unto me, I have heard the voice of the words of this people, which they have spoken unto you. They have well said all that they have spoken. But look at what he says here in verse 29. He says, oh, that there was such a heart in them that they would fear me and keep my commandments always, that it might be well with them and with their children forever. So what did he understand? What did Yah understand? Yah understood clearly and saw clearly that the lack of faith was hindering their relationship, and they can say all day long, you go listen and tell us, and we're going to hear it and do it. And he says, your words are good, but you don't have a heart to fear me and keep my commandments, that it could be well with you, that it will be a blessing to you. You see what I'm saying? So the covenant was trying to be extended to them, and they continuously rejected the elements of the covenant to help them understand more. They did not want that direct relationship. So because of that disconnect, Yah had to put a mediator involved. He had to put a priesthood involved directly in between Israel and Yah, because they didn't want to approach Yah initially. So we're seeing that now there's another token, now there's another thing being added into the covenant, which was the intercession of the priesthood, the service of the priesthood. So what was happening here? The covenant was being broken. There was a lack of faith. This is happening already. This is not talking about these children going into the promised land. This is talking about the generation that was alive at Mount Sinai. He says, go say unto them, get you into your tents again. But as for you, stand you here by me, and I will speak unto you all the commandments, statutes, judgments, which you shall teach them. See, it wasn't just telling them to do certain things. It was teaching them about them, what they mean, what they were supposed to do for us. It says that they may do them in the land which I give them to possess it. And it says, and you shall observe and do as Yahuwah your Elohim have commanded you, and you shall not turn aside to the right hand or to the left. It says, you shall walk in all the ways which Yahuwah your Elohim have commanded you, that you may live, and that it may be well with you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which you shall possess. So you see, he's giving them these covenants, these statutes and these judgments and these commandments. He's teaching them so that they could understand it when they go into the land to possess it. They're going to become a nation. They're going to have a government. So this is very important for them to understand, because this is not what was happening with Abraham. He told Abraham specifically in Genesis 15, you're going to sleep with your fathers, but these children that's going to come from you, they're going to possess this land. And that I'm giving them all of these statutes and judgments so they can become a governing body, a nation. So what happened? Their hearts wasn't in belief. They did not believe. So they were already in opposition, because Yah said clearly in Deuteronomy 5:29, oh, that there was such a heart in them that they would fear me. So they didn't fear him. They didn't reverence him. They didn't believe him. So because of that, this covenant wasn't solidified, because it was a relationship. And when they solidified the covenant, they broke it because their hearts wasn't ready. So look at what it says here, Exodus 32. And those whose hearts were ready were polluted by their own desires, their own complaints, their own murmurings, etc., etc. So look at this, Exodus chapter 32. We're going to look at verse 1-6. It says, when the people saw Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said to him, make us gods, make us mighty ones, which shall go before us. For as this Moses, the man that brought us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. Aaron said to them, break off the golden earrings which are in their ears of your wives, your sons, your daughters, and bring them to me. And he says, all the people broke off the golden earrings that was in their ears and brought them to Aaron, and he received them in their hand, fashioned it with the graving tool after he had made a molten calf. And he said, these be the gods of Israel, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. And when Aaron saw it, and he built the altar, he built an altar in front of it. And Aaron made a proclamation and said, tomorrow is the feast to YAHUAH. He called this golden calf Yah. So this is Aaron. Aaron is calling the golden calf Yah. All of Israel is coming to worship this golden calf and referring to it as a feast unto Yah. They rose up early the next day, offered burnt offerings, peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and to rose up to play. They are breaking this covenant. They are lifting up other gods. But why? Why are they doing this? Because they did not fear the one true Yah, the one true Elohim. They didn't fear him. Not only did they not fear him, they did not respect his commandments and statutes and judgments that was being given to him. They did not want to have that relationship with him. Everybody that had the relationship with him came in contact with him. Joshua, Caleb, the 70 elders that received the spirit from Moses. They all came in contact with him. They all started to speak with him. They in agreement. But everyone else, there was a disconnect. Let's start at verse 7. Yah said to Moses, go down, for your people, which you have brought out of the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them, and they have made themselves a molten calf and have worshipped it and sacrificed unto it and said, these be your gods of Israel, which have brought you out of the land of Egypt. And Yah said unto Moses, I have seen this people, and then behold, it is a stiff-necked people. He says, now therefore, leave me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make you a great nation. So the nation, the emphasis is he's trying to establish the nation. He's trying to establish what he promised to Abraham, a nation. So he says Yahuwah turned back from the destruction that he was going to bring to the people. Moses turned and went down from the mount with the 2 tables and the testimony in his hand. The tables were written on both sides, and on one side and on the other they were written. And the tables were the work of Elohim, the work of Elohim. Yah wrote these things. The writing was the writing of Elohim, graving on the tables. And Joshua heard the noise of the people, and they shouted, as they shouted, and said to Moses, "This is the noise of war." And he said, "It is not the voice of them shouting for mastery, neither is it the voice of them crying for being overcome, but this is the noise of them that's singing. They are singing." Verse 19. And it came to pass as soon as he came near to the camp that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger waxed hot, and he threw the tables out of his hand and broke them beneath the mount. So what's happening here? Not only is there a lack of faith, they did not want to hear him. They did not want to talk to him anymore. But now there was a raising up of other mighty ones, other gods. So when Moses threw the tables, it broke, and basically it was a signifying that he broke, that Israel broke the covenant, that there was a disconnect now. There was a broken covenant that was occurring. Okay? The covenant was already ratified in Exodus chapter 24. In Exodus chapter 24, they read the book of the law. All the people said, "All that we have said we will do." They raised up the altar with the 12 pillars, and they sacrificed and they ratified the covenant. They sprinkled the blood on the book and on the people, and they ratified the covenant. So now here at Exodus 32, Moses goes up to get a symbol of the covenant, which was the 10 commandments and the testimony in his hands. He comes down, he sees them breaking the covenant, and he symbolizes, not purposefully, obviously he's angry. He throws it, and it symbolizes Israel breaking the covenant between Israel and Yah. So now there's a disconnect. Okay? So there's no establishment of Yah's covenant with them. There's no connection between them. So there has to be a intercession added onto this situation. And that's why we have the Levitical priests. And the Levitical priest was added in order to bring them together, in order to bring them to help their lack of faith. Let me show. So Exodus chapter 25, right? So he already saw that they had a lack of faith. He already saw that because they ran away from him when he was talking from the mountain. So he's saying to this, verse 8 of Exodus 25, "Let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show you, after the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all the instruments thereof, even so shall you make it." So very important. Because they ran away from him, he's understanding what they need, right? And he's telling them, we're going to make the ark, we're going to make a sanctuary so I can dwell in the midst of them, so they can see how it works, right? So they can see how the service of Yah works, how I intercede, how I cleanse them, how I wash them, how I atone for their sins. He gave them visuals so that way they can see. And while Moses is up getting these things, they go against Yah and raise up these elements. So we're looking at the covenant. The covenants was added. What was the covenant added? The sanctuary. The sanctuary was added. And what happens at the sanctuary? We do have a study of the sanctuary coming out, referring to the mind of Yah, showing us what was the thoughts behind creating the sanctuary. So the sanctuary was made so Yah can dwell in the midst of them, right? And the children of Israel did not grasp that concept. So Yah made a physical sanctuary so that way physical demonstrations could be done in front of them, so that way they can understand what Yah wants for them and him in their relationship. This is the whole purpose of this. Remember, Exodus chapter 19, right before he even started speaking to them out the mountain, he told them, he says, "If you obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you will be a peculiar treasure to me above all people, for all is mine." It says, "You shall be a kingdom of priests." So what was the addendum added to this covenant? Because of their lack of belief, he added the priesthood of the Levites. Did he initially want Levitical priests? No, he wanted a kingdom of priests. He wanted the priests to come from all tribes. And let me show you where it says that. In the book of Numbers, I believe it's in chapter 3. Let me see. In chapter 3, it talks about the children of Aaron and the work that was going to be done in a tabernacle. Right? Here we go. So he says here, starting from verse 9. Well, I'm going to start from from verse 6, he starts out by saying, bring the tribe of Levi near, present them before Aaron the priest, that they may minister to him. And he says, and they shall keep charge and the charge of the whole congregation before the tabernacle of the congregation to do the service of the tabernacle. He says, they shall keep all the instruments of the tabernacle of the congregation. They shall be in charge, the charge of the children of Israel to do the service of the tabernacle. You shall give the Levites unto Aaron and to the sons, that they entirely be given out of the children of Israel. You shall appoint Aaron and his sons, and they shall wait on the priest's office. The stranger shall not come near, or he shall be put to death. Then it says, Yahuwah speaks to Moses, and he says, behold, I have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel. Now watch this, please. Instead of all the firstborn out of the matrix among the children of Israel. Therefore, the Levites shall be mine. And it says, because all the firstborn are mine, for on that day that I smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I hallowed unto me all the firstborn of Israel, both man and beast. Mine shall they be. I am Yahuwah. What is he saying here? He's saying, bring the Levites, bring Aaron and his sons. They're going to do the service of the temple. I'm going to choose them. And it says in verse 12 of Numbers 3, instead means in its place, right? Everybody knows that. In the place of the firstborn out of the matrix. When did he do that? It says when he smote the firstborn in the land of Egypt. This is Exodus chapter 13. Exodus chapter 13, he gives us instructions right here, sanctify, verse 2, sanctify unto me all the firstborn whatsoever open up the womb of the children of Israel, man and beast. It is mine, right? So what was the purpose of him doing that? He was going to make every child from every tribe do the service of the tabernacle. They were going to be the service of a priesthood so he can have, according to Exodus 19, a kingdom of priests. But because of their lack of faith and their lack of belief, he called one group of people to demonstrate to the children of Israel. Look at it says, verse 8, the charge of the children of Israel to do the service of the temple. So now, instead of the firstborn of all of Israel, we have the Levites doing this work. But he doesn't negate the fact that the firstborn still belongs to him. The firstborn still belongs to Yah, but the service in the tabernacle has to be done with the Levites, because the Levites, if we go back to Exodus 32, look at what happened when Moses came down. After Moses came down, look at what he says here. This is what Yah says, just to throw this back. It says, remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, your servants, to whom you swear to be your own self, and said unto them, I will multiply the seed in the stars of heaven, and all this land that I have spoken of will I give unto your seed, and they shall inherit it forever. So this is Moses reiterating the covenant of Abraham. So there he understands there's a difference between the covenant of Abraham and the covenant that Yah is offering them at Mount Sinai, because they're attaching different instructions based off of their lack of belief. And I think it's fine. Because of our degradation of sin, because of our proneness to forget, we need to have instructions, more instructions. We need to have object lessons, you know. Look at what he says here now. This is why Levi was chosen. Even though Aaron made the golden calf, which is pretty crazy by itself. Whew. Moses stood in the camp. Look at what he says in verse 26 of Exodus 32. Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, "Who is on Yah's side? Let him come to me." All the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him. And he said to them, "Thus saith YAHUAH, Elohim of Israel, put every man his sword by his side and go in and out of the gate to gate throughout the camp, slay every man his brother and every man his companion and every man his neighbor." And it says, "And the children of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and there fell of the people that day 3,000 men." Moses has said, "Consecrate yourselves today to YAHUAH, even every man upon his son and upon his brother, that he may bestow upon you a blessing this day." So what's happening? He's telling them to repent. Many of them are not repentant, but the children of Levi, the majority of the children of Levi, do according to what Moses say. They come on right here. All of the sons of Levi gathered themselves together to Moses in repentance. So because of this demonstration, we have this emphasis on, you are going to be the priest. You are going to be a representation. You are going to represent what we're doing. You are going to represent the priesthood, the kingdom of priests that I wanted all of Israel to have or to become. So we see clearly that there's the covenant of Abraham is being given, to the point where even when Yah was about to destroy Israel, Moses reminded them, not reminded, but reiterated what Yah said, "You swore unto Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob about this." So the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was being restored, as well as another covenant, which we read, that's going to be made with those children. Another covenant that wasn't given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob will be attached to this covenant. It doesn't negate what happened with Abraham. It's an attachment because of what's needed for the children of Israel. So the idea that every single law is given to Abraham and given to, no, that's not true. Every law was not given to our forefathers. Our forefathers received a covenant, a specific covenant, and then because the nation of Israel was being created, there was a governing statutes and judgments and a governing body of instructions that needed to be given to them to function as a nation. So this is a difference, you know. So now we're looking at the children of Israel functioning not only in the covenant that was given to Abraham, which was the covenant, the everlasting covenant, but also a covenant that was given at Mount Sinai, a covenant that was given at Mount Sinai to basically help the children of Israel to basically grasp what they were saying, what Yah was trying to teach them. Okay, so we got the sacrifices that was given to Adam because of his lack of faith. There was the token, you know, you see the rain starts falling and you start to get a little bit worried. You have the rainbow that was placed in the sky to remind Noah that he wouldn't punish the earth again the same way. You have circumcision given to Abraham because of his lack of faith, going in unto Hagar, thinking that he can obtain the children, the promised child, by his own actions. So he has circumcision to remind him and all the families that come on through Abraham, that Abraham is going to be the father of many nations because of the covenant, the everlasting covenant. So there's these constant adding of covenants to the everlasting covenant. Now we get to Mount Sinai. They already have a lack of belief. They already pull themselves away. So he's starting to add statutes and judgments in order for them to be governed as a large group of people, as a nation coming out of Egypt. And then he adds to them a priesthood. Because of their lack of belief, he adds to them a priesthood to replace the firstborn of every child, because every tribe wasn't ready to submit to Yah. So he took one tribe to be an example, to build Israel up, so that way all Israel can become a kingdom of priests. So this is how these things are attached to the everlasting covenant. All right. And this is why we're looking at, let me see if I can share my screen. We're going to look at this verse one more time, right? Deuteronomy, I think it's verse 32. No, verse chapter 5, Deuteronomy chapter 5. It says, Yahuwah, our Elohim, made this covenant with us. Yahuwah made not this covenant with our fathers, but with us who is here alive today. So it's very clear. This covenant that's being given at Mount Sinai wasn't the same one given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But there was an everlasting covenant that is the same throughout all the generations that Yah is attempting to restore. These covenants are added in order to help us to maintain our relationship with Yah. So this is just one example of what's added to the covenant. What else is added to the covenant? During the time of David now, what was added to the covenant during the time of David? Let's look at this. 2 Chronicles chapter 7. Now, what was added to the covenant that wasn't there before? What was told to David? 2 Chronicles chapter 7, we're going to look at verse 17 to 18. Right? It says, as for you, if you will walk before me as David your father walked, and do according to all that I have commanded you, and shall observe in my statutes and my judgments, then will I establish the throne of your kingdom, according as I have covenanted with David your father. So there's a covenant, a specific covenant about the throne of David. Now, don't get this confused with the covenant that was, or the promise that was given to Judah in Genesis 49. The promise that was given to Judah in Genesis 49, let me see if I can pull it out. Right here, verse 10, which is the scepter, right? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come. Until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. So unto Shiloh shall the gathering of the people be. So when we go to David, there's a covenant made with David, but it's not just that the scepter won't leave Judah. Now it's a specific family in the tribe of Judah. Is David's son. So now through David of the line of Judah, nobody else, right? So through David shall the king come, or this ruler come, that will everything will be established through. This is an attachment. So now we have a constant reiteration of this fact that the covenant that's made with David, that his throne will be established, now has to perpetuate until it's fulfilled. But it's attached to the everlasting covenant. It's not something that's, there's not like this covenant didn't always exist, that David was always known as no, this is something that he is planning on fulfilling the everlasting covenant as he's making these requirements, or as he's establishing these relationships. So he makes a covenant with David, saying that there shall not fail a ruler in Israel. But then he says, but if you turn away and forsake my statutes and my commandments, which I set before you, and shall go and serve other gods and worship them, then will I pluck them up by the roots out of my land, which I have given to them. This is according to the covenant of Abraham. And this house, and now this is the covenant of David, which I have sanctified for my name, will I cast out of my sight, and I will make it to be a proverb and a byword among all nations. Among all nations. So let's look at this a little bit more. The Abraham covenant. So how does David recognize the Abrahamic covenant, even with all of the statutes and judgment that he's already applying to the kingdom? But then there's this covenant that's given to David about his throne specifically, not the throne of anybody, any other tribe, not the throne. There was many kings from other, in the northern kingdom. There was many other kings from different tribes, many judges, but there's this promise that his throne will be established, right? Let's look at this. Let's look at First Chronicles. Let's go to chapter 16, right? First Chronicles chapter 16. Let's look at verse 7. Look at what it says here. Then on that day, David delivered first his psalm to thank Yah into the hand of Asaph and his brethren. And he says, give thanks unto Yahuwah, right? So now he's singing his psalm. This is the psalm that he's singing. Give thanks unto Yahuwah, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the people. Sing unto him, sing psalms to him, talk ye of all the wondrous works, glory ye in his holy name. Let the heart of them, the heart of them rejoice that seek Yah. So he's understanding what happened with Israel in the wilderness, that they didn't have a heart, Deuteronomy 5:29. He's saying, let the heart rejoice and seek Yah. Seek Yah and his strength and seek his face continuously. Remember his marvelous works that he has done, his wonders and his judgments out of his mouth. This is referring to Sinai. You seed of Israel, his servants, you children of Jacob, his chosen ones. He is Yahuwah, our Elohim. His judgments are in all the earth. Be mindful always of his covenant, the word which he commanded to thousands of generations, even of the covenant which he made with Abraham, and of his oath unto Isaac, and have confirmed the same to Jacob for a law, and to Israel for an everlasting covenant, saying unto you, I will give you the land of Canaan, the lot of your inheritance. So the covenant, even David here is referencing to the covenant of Abraham and the covenant to Isaac and the covenant to Jacob, and showing also the covenant to Jacob being connected to a law, So David understood this, and David received a promise, a covenant, a separate covenant that was attached, and that covenant of his throne is attached to the whole everlasting covenant. And let me show you how. Let's go to Samuel, 2 Samuel, right? 2 Samuel chapter 2, looking at verse 7. We're going to read verse 7 to, well, let me see, verse 7 to, okay. No, chapter 7. We're going to look at chapter 7, looking at verse 12 to 17. It says, when your days be fulfilled, this is Yah talking to David about what's going to happen afterwards. It says, when your days be fulfilled, you shall sleep with your fathers, and I will set up your seed after you, which shall proceed out of your bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. And if he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. But my mercy shall not depart from him, even as I took it from Saul, whom I put away before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be established forever before you, and your throne shall be established forever. According to all these words and according to all this vision, so did Nathan speak unto David. So not only did David receive this message to give to David, but there was a vision. So we look at Isaiah, right? Isaiah, this is years after David, right? Isaiah chapter 9, verse 7. Look at what it says. Of the increase of his government and the peace that shall be no end. It says, upon the throne of David and his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from this point on, even forever. The zeal of Yahuwah will perform this. So again, we see the throne of David being mentioned. And there's many different prophecies, many different emphasis on this throne being attached to Yah fulfilling this covenant in the grand scheme of everything. So the covenant, the throne of David, is being added to the everlasting covenant, and it's also being applied to Messiah. Messiah comes through not only through the tribe of Judah, but he comes specifically through the line of David in order to fulfill this particular promise, this particular covenant that was attached to the everlasting covenant. So there was always a seed that was going to come. If you notice, Genesis 3:15, Abraham, Noah, there was always a seed that was going to come. And now, even with Moses, when you look at Moses, you see many prophetic instances like Deuteronomy 18, where it talks about a prophet that's going to come to listen to that prophet. And now we have a reiteration of the covenant, Abraham's covenant that was given about the seed. And we have David saying it in the book of Psalms as well, talking about the Abrahamic covenant and how we ought to be involved in that covenant. So this covenant that was given at Mount Sinai, we can clearly see that there were attachments because of their lack of belief in order to help maintain their relationship. The Levitical priesthood was added. Matter of fact, it replaced the work of the firstborn. It replaced the work of the firstborn, but it didn't replace the importance of the firstborn of every tribe and every family. It just replaced the work that the firstborn was supposed to do and in the sanctuary. The sanctuary was given because they ran away from Yah. So Yah is now saying, build me a sanctuary so I can dwell in the midst of them. Why? Because when he came down to Mount Sinai, these guys ran away. So he's saying, build me a sanctuary so that way I can try to help them understand that I want to dwell in them, with them. So these things were all added to the covenant, and they are required. They are required until a fulfillment of those things come. The everlasting covenant, it doesn't fulfill. It's an ongoing covenant. It's the covenant where if you obey, you live forever. It's that covenant doesn't end. It gets broken, but it does not end. But these other covenants that's attached, they get fulfilled. The sacrificial covenant that was added to Adam, that Cain and Abel was performing, they get fulfilled. All these things, they get fulfilled. The throne of David, fulfilled. The Levitical priests, fulfilled. Yah wants a kingdom of priests. So now that we understand these covenants that are attached to the everlasting covenant, especially since it's labeled now the Abrahamic covenant, we see that the Abrahamic covenant does not get affected because other things are added to it. The Abrahamic covenant has to continue until it's completed. And the completion is the new earth, but it's based off of obeying and following Yah and surrendering completely. So praise Yah. I hope that this was understanding the covenant and all looking through history of all these different covenants is sometimes very heavy. So I would basically, advise that everybody go back and look over these things, take notes, and go back to the other parts as well. It's very important for us to understand the difference, because when we get into the language of the New Testament, there's a very specific covenant that is referring to, that it's talking about as being altered. And it's not talking about an Abrahamic covenant. It's not talking about an everlasting covenant. It's talking about a very specific covenant. So we're going to talk about that in the next video. So I hope that this was clear. I hope that we understand the Moses covenant and how the covenant broke, and the difference between what was given to the children and what was given to our forefathers. I hope that we understand the adding of the covenant that was given to David, the adding of the Son, the everlasting throne that's going to be established forever, and peace, no end, Isaiah 9:7. And there's many more to discuss. But this is for you guys to go back and study for yourselves as well and test these things. So I hope that this was a clear and enjoyable study. And I hope that to see you guys in the next study. Shalom, everyone. Shalom, shalom. Thank you guys for joining our study today. I hope that it was edifying. And if you want to support this ministry, you can support us on 4alc.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube page. Click the like button and the notification bell. I hope to see you guys on the next study. Shalom, guys.